Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Phil McGrath, and I'll be your host on today's webinar with the Category Management Shopper Insights Association. Today, we have an outstanding presentation being delivered by Marc Hubbard from the Advantage Group. Marc is the Vice President of their U.S. Client Services, and the presentation today is going to be about why collaboration matters in a crisis and learnings from the Advantage Group about China during the COVID-19 epidemic. In today's presentation, we're going to learn how the Chinese dealt with COVID-19 pandemic as it related to the actions that had the greatest impact on both the supplier and retailer community. This is extremely relevant information for where we are today with it. I certainly hope that today finds you and your family healthy during this pandemic. So we're glad to have Marc here. Marc, you're a Vice President of U.S. Client Services at the Advantage Group, and you have worked for many companies, including Nielsen, Google, Planet Retail, and now with the global retailer and supplier collaboration experts, Advantage Group International. We're looking forward to your presentation today because of your experience and having worked in 3 continents with leading international Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 CPG retailers and technology companies, as well as companies in the supply chain industry. You've got a great background, and so I'm sure you'll bring it to life today in today's presentation. For everyone in the audience, if you have questions, by all means, we would like to bring those questions to Marc. And the way you'll do that is you can use the chat room. You can enter the question in the chat room. We're going to pull the questions until the presentation is completed. But then Marc has said that he'd be glad to entertain all your questions. So throughout the presentation, if you have a question, enter it in the chat room. We'll have them stored and ready to go. And when Marc concludes and opens up the Q&A, we'll be asking your questions directly to Marc. This presentation will be made available to you at the conclusion, as well as it'll be in our resource library. So Marc, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Phil, and thank you to everyone at the CMA for allowing us to speak today and share these learnings. To everyone in the audience, first of all, I hope you and all your loved ones are well during this difficult time, and really thank you to the industry for what you're doing. Obviously, this is a critical industry, and hopefully some of the learnings we've got from China and some other markets will help you think about how to move forward in this crisis. Just a little bit about Advantage. We are the leaders in business-to-business customer engagement for more than 30 years now in more than 40 countries. We work with the largest retailers and CPG companies to understand how both sides engage with each other, collaborate, and move the business forward. And we're here today specifically to share some insights around from our China business as well as some other markets. And we want you to walk away learning about what China has told us from their crisis in February, which is now coming to an end. Discover some of the actions and behaviors that you can employ during a crisis, and then help you prepare to engage how you're showing up and adjusting for the state of the future business once we come out of this. So to set this difficult scene, we have a business in China, and our team conducted a study over 12 days between February 13th and February 25th with an objective to assess the impact of this outbreak on suppliers and relationship communities and provide some practical strategies that you can put into business right now to keep you on track. And for context, right, China really went into lockdown in Wuhan on January 23rd. So about 3 weeks into that lockdown, we started to do this research. Most American major cities started their lockdowns around the 20th, 25th of March. So it's about 3 weeks ago. So this feedback from China is about the same stage in their cycle as the US is in today. So hopefully it's extremely relevant. We got feedback from more than 50 companies, from big retailers like Walmart, Sunart, and Metro, to CPG companies you're familiar with today, including Mondelez, Nestle, and Mars, and many others. And over 300 unique individuals gave that feedback across 50 companies. So it's a very diverse portfolio. This is data from the Chinese Retail Federation. Think of it as our NRF, or a little bit like our FMI trade association. just about where China was at the beginning of February, where they'd already had some serious lockdowns. At that point, at the early February, more than 1.7 million Chinese employees were affected because 43,000 stores had closed. 50% of those store closings were due to too few consumers. 45 people said it was about management making that request to be healthy. And then also 40% had to shut stores because of just staff shortages because of the crisis. In fact, most stores were losing about $150,000 per store closing. So literally the millions and millions of dollars are on the line. And what's perhaps most interesting in the space we play in right now is if we look at the upper right-hand corner, online growth was already up 260% in China. Now, China is already either arguably the first or second most mature e-commerce market in the world, probably twice as mature in terms of, say, grocery sales online than the US. And yet, even in that very short window, only a few weeks after the pandemic really hit heavily in China, they had already seen a 260% increase in online sales. And that trend of massive increase in online sales is what we've seen, obviously, here in the US, from where I'm from originally in the UK, and most countries around the world. When we talk to our country managers, the importance of online is only growing. So a little bit of context. So let's get into some of the data now. What did we learn from Chinese retailers? How might we apply it to our current situation as we are today in the US? Well, we asked them first and foremost, again, at this early February, what do you think Q1 sales are going to look like? So by the end of March, where's the business going to go? The lighter blue color is the supplier base, so the CPGs, and the dark is the retailers. Interestingly enough, we see differences of opinion. While 18% of suppliers thought there would be an increase in their sales in the quarter, 56% of retailers saw that. Whereas 71% of suppliers saw a decrease and only 44% of retailers. Why is that? Well, health and safety is a top concern, and thus things like disinfecting products were crazily bought, just like we're seeing in the US. Paper products, right? Heavy sales, and so certain categories have been overly benefiting from that, and hence we see why that increase for certain categories, but many others are not. Retailers are certainly pushing more of their own categories online, right? Again, they saw the trend to more increasing online sales. And while China is, say, about twice as mature in terms of grocery e-com sales of the US, everyone was trying to get even more online as quickly as possible to help meet where the consumer was at. Because consumers weren't like Americans wanting to go into stores. They were trying to buy online and have deliveries to their home, and retailers were trying to capture that need state. And there were certainly, just like we're seeing in the US, production capacity shortages because workers couldn't get to work, either because of the lockdown in China, because of, unfortunately, illnesses where individual workers were not able to get to the line. And I know manufacturers today are having some production capacities in certain places. And then there's obviously just the physical logistic problem, right, about how do we get goods into retailers and then into the store shelves. We asked then the question, how long will this last? Again, think of this almost like Americans answering today, right? We're 3 weeks into our lockdown. What were the Chinese feeling at that time? Well, only 8% it was going to last a month. And there were differences between retailers and suppliers again, but broadly speaking, people thought it was going to be 3 to 6 months. Retailers thought it lasted a little bit longer, suppliers a little bit less time. But that seemed to be the feeling in China at that time. And as obviously you're hearing in the States, we're talking about opening things up, but the impact may well last for multiple months, even when we start to open up the country. I know China was hoping that by the end of March, things would alleviate. And in fact, actually, if anyone's been reading the news, literally, I think this week, Wuhan, that the epicenter has started to unlock things and allow people to leave. So they were pretty close to their estimate. Within the first month or so, things would start to open up, but they weren't expecting things to improve for multiple months. Manufacturers were hoping to continue to improve supply chain and normalize, but they thought it would take a long time. And what the bigger concern was the shifting consumer behavior, right? Not only shifting to online, but just what would that mean for the business, and how would certain businesses adjust that were further behind that online curve, or getting the right product mix. And certainly, foot traffic, even as we see China opening up, what we're hearing from our China country manager literally yesterday when I talked to him was, yes, the businesses are starting to open up, but very, very slowly, cautiously. And as you can imagine, shoppers are cautious about re-entering stores. Everyone's got to wear face masks, and online continues to be a primary form of retail where possible. So what is the path to recovery? What's partnership? In fact, more than 80% of retailers or suppliers believe that partnership is the most important thing during this time. 80+% said it really matters. And strong collaboration is reducing the impact of the epidemic on their business and stabilizing their business. It makes perfect sense, but just pause and think of yourself, what are you doing to show that partnership? Maybe that means you don't call that retailer, right? Because you need to give them the space to get on with the mission critical. Certainly what we're hearing from some markets is no new product launches, marketing being pulled back, right? Because now is not necessarily the right time. It's about simply getting product on the shelf. But partnership is critical. And in fact, interestingly enough, 64% of the suppliers and 77% of the retailers said they actually felt collaboration had improved during the pandemic in China. Companies are embracing this new collaboration model, trying to be supportive of each other, trying to facilitate, improved ways of working so that over the weeks and months ahead, they can move the business forward. What that future looks like is very uncertain though. So then we asked a few more detailed questions, and we actually broke the feedback out by supplier category and retailer category. And we said, where have we seen alignment of relationships, or where have we seen it strengthen? Well, all fresh food suppliers in our study, and 86% of retailers said for fresh food, collaboration has actually strengthened over this time. I think it makes sense, right? Fresh food is clearly a very challenging category to work with, very critical right now, and everyone was working hard. Health protection, again, very clearly, both retailers and suppliers felt that health protection collaboration had grown because it's such an important critical category. That's great to see. What I found interesting was looking at personal care and dairy products, different views between the two respondent groups. Retailers really across the board, regardless of category, felt that collaboration had improved. Personal care suppliers did see some strong improvement, but also some mixed, weaker results. And dairy products, same thing. And why is that? Honestly, we don't have any data to prove it. Kind of personal opinion hypotheses is because some of those are not quite as critical categories as, say, health protection. Retailers have to, be prioritizing their time, and they're spending time with some of the bigger suppliers, or that buyer is focusing their time on other categories and they're not spending the attention they might on some categories. And so certain suppliers may be getting pushed behind. If you're not a number one supplier, you may be getting less attention. But interesting to see the spread of different categories. But broadly, everyone said at least 50% said, yes, we're getting stronger in this time. It makes perfect sense. Now, what are the behaviors say about your readiness for a crisis? What we saw very clearly from our research with both retail and suppliers, there are certain behaviors that were weakening relationships and certain that were improving. And we'll look at the things that were struggling, right? An unstable supply chain. We've done research for more than 30 years now with, again, 40 countries, literally thousands of retail and suppliers. And I know we're all in kind of category management here, but supply chain matters most. That marketing plan's great, but if you can't get the product on the shelf when we need it, no one cares about the marketing plan. And unfortunately, companies that have had supply struggles, that is still, damaging relationships and potentially leading vendors to move to retailers moving to other vendors. Online was a big thing, right? We trying to meet the shopper where he or she was at. There were certainly some struggles getting product online into that right DC, or simply getting the marketing material, right? Many of these retailers hadn't set up their businesses as well as they could for an online demand. And so you as a marketing team were having to push content to that retailer and help them set up and then make those items land. Incomplete data, inaccurate data, inefficient data, not knowing what's on shelf where was causing a lot of challenges in China and obviously here in the States too. And then inefficient communication. Are you very succinct in your message, right? No one's got a lot of time right now, particularly retailers, particularly those in supply chain. So anything you can do to be succinct, not sending unnecessary messaging or really trying to boil down your message to the few key points was absolutely mission critical. And where that wasn't happening, that was turning retailers off and potentially turning them to competitors or other suppliers. Now, what was working? What was particularly retailers or suppliers to saying what was strengthening and improving things? Right, an emergency plan, actually being clear about what the game plan is, how we're going to move through this. not the 6-month plan, but the 6-day or the 6-hour plan. Really important. Strategies for online and offline, right? How are we going to meet those needs was really important. Trying to link the business together, because many retailers, while they were much more mature in their e-com business, still are primarily, physical store businesses. How do you link the teams together to have a consistent message? Just ways of working, cultural values and partnership, right? Do we like each other as human beings? Do we feel we're on the same page? Do we work to the same goal? Companies that express that mutuality seem to do very well, and that was seen as behaviors that tied you in closer and made you be that partner of choice going forward. And then cross-functional collaboration. We've seen that in our work. Even when there is no crisis, companies that are winning have wonderful, excellent, stellar cross-functional collaboration. Our marketing talking to supply chain, talking to the merchant, making sure the sales guys are not over-promising and then under-delivering, right? When we're all working together consistently, it drives a stronger business performance, and that's critical going through a crisis. So what are the needs? We asked the needs of the retailers and suppliers, and what are the key things that came out? Well, if you're a retailer, what do they want from you as a supplier? Left-hand side. 94% said the most important thing from my supplier right now is an efficient supply chain. Get me what I need when I need it. And this is Chinese feedback, but we also saw similar results in other countries. If you're not muted, could you please mute your phone? We seem to have some background noise. Thank you. We certainly saw an increase in investment in what's called O2O, which is offline to online. So how are we putting our dollars? Where do we put our dollars, right? And it's definitely trying to get the marketing into the online position to help shoppers know what's available to them. 73% of retailers said what's critical is, again, just increased supply. We've all seen it in our country as well as in China, right? Cleaning products, paper products in very high demand. 62% of retailers said it's about the right people following up. So again, the people supporting my business, not getting too much communication, but the right people that can move the business forward. And then category insights is certainly helpful, but much less important than the basic blocking and tackling. On the right-hand side, you can see what suppliers need from their retail partners. We won't go into that today because you can read it yourself. Slightly less important characteristics, but certainly very critical. So what was particularly important during this time was about trust, openness, problem solving, right? Both suppliers and retailers said it's absolute priority. Trust has been the #1 driver of performance between suppliers and retailers for the past 3 years in our research in pretty much every country around the world. Trust, trust, trust. What drives trust? It's about communication, clear, consistent communication, and responsiveness. Particularly in a crisis, I can't wait a day. I can't even wait 10 minutes really for an answer, right? We're literally not quite in panic mode. So how do I build trust? Great, clear communication, immediately responsive. Even if that is, thanks for the email, Phil, I heard you, but I don't know the answer right now. I'm going to get back to you, right? Give me confidence that you're on it, right? Think about how you can do those things to drive that responsiveness even when you haven't got the answer, because trust is going to be your foundation moving forward. And what practically this means for retailers is they're going to pick vendors that they trust more, right? If they trust your supply, they may, overemphasize you because they need things now. Senior leadership having timely communication, really important. Again, communication was really one of the big themes that we saw throughout the research. To strengthen collaboration, but clear, not over communicating in terms of burdening people with useless noise and news, but being consistent, helping them show there's a game plan, helping them show you're there to support them. So for trust, right? It's about accountability too. If I'm going to trust you, I have to understand you're going to be accountable for what's happening and be clear about where I'm at. Transparency, right? Limit those negotiation behaviors. Right now, in order to be transparent, it's about being honest. The more you hide things, the more you're going to limit your transparency. And then clearly it's about problem solving. Understanding you may not have every answer this second. You may not have that shipment they're looking for. But be clear, you're working on it. What you can and can't do, that builds trust and confidence and makes you the person they're going to call next time. And then certainly there's been an increase in frequency. That's absolutely critical. But it's also critical to make sure that frequency is relevant, right? Be really judicious about how you communicate because people are so swamped in the retail space. So big picture stuff, absolutely critical. Supply chain, 94% of the retailers in China during this period said that logistics support was the most important thing. Very concerned about factory closures, which were certainly more prevalent in China than they are in the US right now, and needing to understand what product is available where in a very diverse network in a very diverse country. And then offline to online. Home delivery was increasing. 73% of suppliers and 79% of retailers reported an increase in online shopping at this critical time, and they were desperately trying to upgrade their capabilities in that space. Now, what we've seen is that that online increase happened in other countries too, including obviously here in the US. Interesting side note on the supply chain piece, I was talking to our Australian country manager a few days ago, and he was saying that what they're hearing for is because, like us, we have some supply chain shortages right now, not enough trucks, or trucks not be able to get into DCs and unload quickly. It's actually raising the costs in some ways. And suppliers that are winning are less focused about the margin game right now and just focus on getting supply going. And retailers and suppliers may, in many cases, while having great top line sales, their margin may not be growing nearly as fast because of supplying issues, extra costs around production capacity, extra cost around shipping. But in order to meet the needs of their consumers, that's what they're going to do, knowing that those top line sales won't last forever, but it's the right thing to do. Now, I was talking to our Italian country manager. As we know, sadly, Italy is in a slightly different place than even China was, and I thought it was relevant to share their learnings too. So on March 10th, they shut down. About 2 weeks before the US started shutting down, Italy went into lockdown. Unfortunately, for context, their mortality rate in Italy is about 7 times the size of the US. So per million population, they have about 7 times the number of deaths we have. It's really bad in Italy. And the government is considering not opening the country up until at least May. So Italy is going through lockdown for at least another month. What did we learn from Italy right now, literally in the last few days? Well, literally everyone is living day to day. There is no long-term planning between retailers and suppliers. Like China is about supply and shipping and immediacy. What they're doing in Italy is they've basically shut down all new product launches. Retailers do not want to hear about it. Manufacturers don't want to talk about it because they need to focus their lines on building those staples and not those new ramp-up items. The marketing as well is largely shut down while everyone's focusing on, again, basic supply to those critical items that don't need to be advertised. So what are retailers' expectations? And I'll let you read it yourself. I won't use the language myself, but it's very clear. Make it simple for that retailer, right? The Italian retailers are telling their suppliers, make it simple for me. Help me keep my shelves filled. And every US retailer I'm talking to right now that actually wants to talk to us because they're obviously busy filling shelves, same thing. Look, collaboration is super important. We are going to get through this, but right now, my mission critical for everyone in my organization is keep my store shelves filled. But Italy, same as China, same as here in the US, trust, collaboration, and transparency are the key factors in how we move through that as a business and where we deploy our precious resources. So my question to you is, are you ready? How is your company ready for this crisis? Well, to support that, Advantage Group will continue to do its usual annual collaboration study and help you understand how your retailers perceive you as an organization. As part of that research this year and around the world, we're asking a unique question. Rate these suppliers on collaboration during a crisis, and suppliers will have the ability to rate retailers on collaboration in a crisis. And so look out for late summer this fall. We'll do another session on the learnings from that session with literally probably 3,000-4,000 US respondents across retail and supply chain on how they evaluated their their partners around collaboration during a crisis. But you don't need to wait 6 months for that insights. Associate engagement is critical. We talked about collaboration, transparency. Well, never before has associate engagement been more critical. And I'm sure you see that in your own organization. And so what Advantage is doing right now has developed a tool to listen to the voice of the associate, looking at crisis management and how your associates feel about your organization right now. And certainly if it's an area you'd like to discuss with me, you can reach out afterwards and discuss how we can help you assess the pulse of your associates, whether they're factory, store level, head office, across a number of different competencies. We can turn this on in just a couple of days and help you understand where you're at and then measure that over time to make sure you're doing everything you can for your associates. I'm going to wrap it up there and then open it up to any questions the audience might have. Phil, are there any questions?
Hello, Mark.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I did a double mute when we had gotten some feedback back there. So I've got a couple questions here. Let me bring them forward to you. How applicable does Advantage think that the learnings from China are to what's happening in the U.S. market?
Thank you for the question. Extremely applicable, largely because talking to our colleagues in other parts of the world, they're having the same basic story. Retailers are saying pretty much the same thing to them, and American retailers we're talking to and suppliers are giving us the same story. Supply chain's critical. It is about collaboration and communication and just helping, do the basics right now. That longer term stuff has to be put on hold for a while.
Okay. To the audience out there, if you do have questions, be sure to enter them now in the chat room as Mark is taking the questions at this time. I have one that just came in. Are there any key learnings on the Bev alcohol category that you could share with us?
So thank you for that. I actually happen to run our beverage alcohol practice as well. I can tell you nothing specific right now. I mean, anecdotally, I was talking to the neighbor and she'd gone to Binny's in Chicago where we live and had stocked up on wine. I know we're probably buying extra wine right now because we're stuck at home. I don't mean to jest, but there's nothing formal in our research. Anecdotally, we're seeing, at least I want to call it my neighbors demand, but the challenge, of course, is that for most, as you know, most bev alcohol companies, there are some restrictions in the US on how you can supply that. And certainly half of your business plus is in restaurant space. So we're not sure if the consumption is increasing collectively. It's just switching right from to grocery store from your restaurant business.
Okay, where do you think joint business planning and top-to-top meetings are ranking in this change?
Today, tomorrow, in my opinion, probably next month, 0. If you ask them the question, hey, retailer X, when can we do our top-to-top? They might be offended by it actually, right? They're literally trying to keep store shelves stocked and they're trying to keep their frontline associates healthy. I think where will joint business planning, where will top-to-tops be when we move through this, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, mission critical. And it may not be always the biggest supplier, right? I think what some of the learnings will be, who are those suppliers that were able to stand up in a crisis, right? Yes, of course, if you're a very, very large supplier, you're still mission critical because of the size you bring. But I think retail will be looking at who was able to show up. You may not be the biggest supplier in terms of volume, but if you could show up, if you were there to help, you had great supply chain, you had great marketing, you were able to support the online business, it may well raise your profile with that retailer. And I absolutely believe we will only have to strengthen joint business planning going forward. But in the near term, and that may be a few weeks, no one wants to hear about it.
Okay, great. Got another question. A few of them questions are coming in, so by all means, folks, use the chat room to enter the questions. Here's one, Mark. Was there a difference between smaller and larger suppliers, maybe around supply chain, manpower, et cetera, something like that? Did you notice any of that?
We didn't see anything in the data, and to be honest, depends how you define small, right? I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, our China study was largely focused on the big players. It was the largest grocery chains. It was those largely global CPG brands. So that's the bias of the result. I haven't got any data to say how the smaller companies are doing, unfortunately.
And here's the question everybody would love to know the answer to. So hopefully you have it, Mark. What is your point of view on long-term implications to shopper behavior?
So I'll be perfectly transparent. We obviously have no data, right? This is the Marc Hubbard opinion. This may not even be the company opinion. My personal opinion is I do believe what we're seeing in China and other parts of the world, e-com will continue to accelerate. It already has been, but I think it's going to accelerate even faster. Personally, as a shopper myself, I've used e-com more than I have before, even though I was an e-com shopper. Why do I need to go to the store, especially for me in the next, we'll call it few weeks, few months? I am cautious about, re-entering society, shall we say, right? Do I want to go to the supermarket? Do I want to go to that restaurant? So my belief is it will have a long-term impact on shopper traffic. I do not think stores are dead. So please, anyone that runs a retail store, I'm not telling you your business is over tomorrow, but I personally believe foot traffic will continue to shrink and more people will look for online. And I think more people get comfortable with online delivery, particularly around fresh produce, and say, hey, it's looked after. I expect that to accelerate, and we'll see a much bigger steepening of that online curve over the next year or two.
Mm-hmm. And building off of that question to an extent, what do you think retailers expect from suppliers in terms of the types of pre, during, and post-COVID-19 shopper insights that they would expect retailers would want to see?
Well, so there's the three pieces, right? There's pre. So what were retailers telling us about shopper insights? Call it in our last study last year, or just in conversations before the start of this year. Shopper insights are critical, right? If you own a store, then you need to know who your shopper is, or even if it's online. I think one of the big needs that wasn't always met by the industry was make it relevant to me, right? Let's be honest, everyone's selfish, everyone's self-centered to some extent. So giving them your retailer X generic shopper insights is much less interesting. Say, hey, here's the shopper in your store, exactly what they look like, right? The more you can tailor it to them, and more you can tailor it to their business strategy. So when you link, hey, the shopper that looks like X is your primary shopper, and this is what their behavior is, that's when it makes it meaningful, right? Make it meaningful to me. Make sure whenever you deliver the insights, it's not about you, it's about them. And when you reframe you in their terms, you really drive business relationships and trust. In terms of now, I think everyone's interested in information, but again, make it relevant, right? If it's a nice to have read, maybe now's not the right time to send it out, right? What is relevant right now about shoppers that you would help your retailer? If it's not immediacy, then maybe it's not useful. Going forward, I think the need still remains the same. Make it relevant to me. As I've said a lot already, right? E-com seems to only be accelerating. Let's be honest, most retailers outside the big 3 or 4 are not as sophisticated in the e-com space, the digital space, the online space. So think about what you can do to support those retailers, right? Everyone is still learning e-com. No one's mastered it, no matter what they say. So they're all looking to learn from each other. If you have great learnings from an experience with one retailer, whether it's shopper insights, what you did in marketing, how you set up their web page, share that with everyone else. Right, everyone's desperate to learn, and you as a supplier have a unique experience, right? You don't have a single customer. You might have 50 or 100 or 1,000 retailers you touch. So what can you bring from a work with another retailer that can help them understand a new way of looking at the shopper and understanding the online space? I think retailers are going to lap that up once we get through this.
Yeah, boy, I would agree with you on that, and certainly from the type of interest we've had in webinars over the last few weeks around online, everyone's trying to understand it a little bit better, and most people want to know what's going to stick after this is all over. And I guess the one point of consideration is, we're talking about it within our industry, but online is becoming pervasive in every type of industry. So folks are going to be much more in tune to that after it's over, I guess.
Absolutely, and I'll give you some anecdotal stories from e-com retailers I work with, because I also lead our e-com practice. One of the complaints from many e-com retailers is that you as an industry, the CPG industry, are not bringing the talent we need. Particularly earlier on, 2-3 years ago, many CPG said, oh, it's digital, so I'll find a young associate, right? Someone who's millennial, because they're young and they must understand e-com. And they might, but don't assume they do, right? And so it's about quality of talent, right? Don't just put younger associates on because they're young. Make sure they understand the space and help train them on the lexicon and empower them to make decisions, because these retailers are moving super fast, much faster, particularly the pure play retailers that you see. They move much faster than bricks and mortar, and so you need to have an empowered associate as well as a e-com savvy associate. Another thing I heard from many retailers, just literally in our last round of research, late last year, was many CPGs have been building their e-com muscles for years. But for a lot of you, it's still basic blocking and tackling. Have you got all your products available to me online? Have we got the best imagery possible? Have you helped me build my internal search engine and lexicon so when my shopper comes to my site, they can find you quickly? Have you given me nutritional panel information or links to other marketing material? That sounds basic and boring, but we have seen companies get massive increases in sales when you just actually get the page set up right. And what can you do? What are you doing today while e-com's only growing to make sure every retailer's website page is set up as perfectly as it can be? Because that will help them find your product and help you make those sales.
Yeah, you hit on a real strong point there in making sure that you have the right people that have the right expertise to look at the e-com data too, because it has many nuances built into it, but can be extremely powerful when used the right way. So a question came in also on long-term impact to assortment of essential products. Have you got any information on some of that, on the essential products and what you think will happen to the assortment in that area?
So unfortunately, no, because literally everywhere in the world is still going through the pandemic, right? No one's out of it. So there is no data to say. I think if we think practically, right, we're using more cleaners. So naturally that's not overly pantry stocking. There's going to be some pantry stocking. And I was talking to someone, he asked me not to name his name, but talking to someone yesterday who's very senior in the industry and said, look, as a CPG company, yes, we're desperately trying to keep the lines running, but also understand we don't want to overstock. I do think shopper behavior will change. I think perhaps more important than COVID-19, and I don't mean this disrespectfully because there's a lot of death happening right now, is the economy, right? We just saw today another almost 7 million Americans are now unemployed. We're looking at 15 to 20 million Americans unemployed. That recession, whatever that looks like, I think is going to be equally or perhaps more impactful on changing shopper behavior than this hopefully short-term COVID-19 experience. And I think that's something that you as a CPG company should be thinking about. What does that mean for us as a business? Does that mean different brands? Does that mean certain retailers that are primed for low cost may do even better in the coming months and few years as we get through the health crisis and have an economic crisis to deal with?
Well, these are excellent questions that are coming in. It certainly addresses what's on people's minds. So please continue to enter your questions in the chat room here. Due to lower foot traffic coming out of this crisis, do you think innovation and new item adoption will be lower, especially as we have seen consumers turn to larger brands in this crisis? Does China provide any indication on what's happening in that area?
We have no data on innovation right now other than the anecdotal story from Italy we have, which is the Italian retailers telling the suppliers, I don't want to talk about innovation right now because I'm to the commenter's point, it's about the key brands. What does innovation mean long term? I think there is, but I think it doesn't have to be, and here's why. We traditionally have gone to market in a certain way with new products, right? But with technology, and if you look at what's happened in the UK, right, which is again a much more mature grocery market for e-com than we have in the States, there's plenty of ways to do sampling and trial in a digital environment. So I'm not sure that maybe how you roll out your new product will be different, but I do think new product is still critical for sure. It is growth, and again, up until the crisis, right, retailers had switched from a margin game to a growth game. So we'll have to see, but I think it's not so much innovation will be less important. It's about how you roll that out may look differently. Having to use free samples through an online portal versus assuming a shopper is going to go and see your item in store.
Good. Here's an interesting question. How are suppliers going to respond to customer demand for products made in America and other countries, except for China?
I have no idea, to be honest. I think it's going to be an interesting social experiment, right? Do we focus on made in America now because we need products closer to home? Do we go back to our global economy where we have supply chain all over the world? I wish I could give an answer. I don't know. It'd be pure speculation.
Mm-hmm. What are U.S. retailers telling you at Advantage? Have you talked to many retailers in the U.S.?
Yes, so we work with literally dozens and dozens, and I'll be perfectly transparent. Many of them are not talking to us because they're literally so busy trying to stock that shelf and I take it as no disrespect to us, that they're just too busy, and we totally respect that. We have a policy called respect the retailer. Those that have spoken to us, and there have been many, because we work with so many, they are, I wouldn't say they're struggling, but they're very focused, right, on the minimum, to the Italian point, keep it clean, help me stock the shelf, help me get, a lot of it is logistic stuff. We know what we need, those staple items, and we can't get them fast enough, from the DC. That is the challenge right now. And so they're all telling us to absolutely, collaboration is even more important now than ever before. We absolutely believe 110% that we need to be doing more in the future to partner with our suppliers. But right now, today, the next hour, the next couple of days, is about help me fill my shelves. And anything else has got to be shelved for what they're telling us. Like, talk to me in a month. If it's not about helping me fill my shelf today, talk to me in May. I'm just too focused on the blocking and tackling right now.
Yeah, it's certainly going to open the door for some interesting conversation once we get beyond the crisis mode here.
Absolutely.
See how retailers have handled it and what changes they're going to make going forward.
And that's part of our research later on this year. So hang in there.
If we have any other additional questions, please enter them now. Mark, that kind of brings us to the conclusion on the questions. Let's see if any others come in. I don't have any coming in right now. So I guess, Mark, if you want to make some closing, I do have one that just came back in here today.
Sure.
Have you noticed or had any type of growth of immune system products?
We don't track down at the UP, so we're not a scan track solution. What I have read from those companies that do that is certainly they're seeing an increase in any cleaning, healthcare items are going gangbusters. But that would have to be a different company to answer that question.
Yeah, probably getting down to that level is a little early. So, well, Mark, why don't you bring it to conclusion if you've got some wrap-up questions?
Well, just first of all, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the CMA for this opportunity to speak with you all today. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions you weren't comfortable asking to the group. Again, as Phil said, the presentation, the recording will be made available to everyone on the CMA website later. And I would say, be well. Thank you for all you're doing to keep the stores stocked, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
That's good. And of course, while you were talking, we did get one more in, and I hope you don't mind taking it.
Of course.
Okay, it's a good question. Hey, things like sustainable packaging, organic, farm to table, etc., made a big impact over the last 5 years. Where does that land in the new back to basics economy?
We do not have any data on that specifically. Just my own anecdote. Again, this will be the Marc Hubbard analysis, not anything I can kind of put data against. I don't think it really matters right now, right? We're literally trying to keep store shelves stocked. Is there enough bananas to buy? Whether they're organic or not doesn't matter to most consumers. Once we get through this and we have what we call a normalized system, I absolutely believe that things like sustainability and natural where consumers are at. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't change. But again, right now, the next hour, the next few days, I'm going to buy whatever brand I can if I need, certain items. I'm going to get it because I need it.
So, hey, Mark, thank you so much for taking these questions. Those were a lot of questions. I think it really highlights what is on people's mind and what's on companies, what they're trying to work around and plan for. You did an excellent job of answering the questions, and your presentation was so relevant to what's happening here today. We appreciate your support and your membership and your attendance at our conferences and events and sharing your knowledge and expertise with our members. So thank you from all of us at the Category Management and Shopper Insights Association. To everybody in the audience, these are trying times. I hope today's presentation by Mark provided some insights and can help you better plan in the days ahead as we work through the crisis and look to the future going forward. And thank you for taking the time today to sit in on this presentation. Our next presentation on our webinar series is going to be 1 week from today, and it's going to be on April 16th, and it's going to be put together by CNR Research. And I think with their view of the shopper and shopper insights, it'll be a truly interesting conversation. And so please plan to join us next Thursday at 10 a.m. for a presentation on the contemporary approach to acting against shopper segmentation against households with kids. And with that, I'm going to bring the webinar today to conclusion. Thank you, everybody, and good day.